So it's called CANA. Don't be surprised if you see that as well, okay? So, treatment regimen. If the patient is asymptomatic when you get there, okay, watch them. If it was a vapor exposure, they need to be watched for an hour. If they're good after an hour, you can cut them loose after an hour, okay? If it's a liquid exposure, this victim needs to be watched for 18 hours. Transport them, okay? Oh, let me go back to this for a second. Nicolas Cage in The Rock. How many of you saw that movie? Okay. Do you remember, he drops one of these things containing sarin or VX, sarin I think, okay, exposes himself and decides he's going to treat himself. Okay. Do you remember what he did? Intracardiac treatment with atropine, hopefully, okay. Resist that urge, okay. IM works just fine, okay. All right, if this is a mild exposure, vapor or liquid, mild exposure, so a little bit of eye findings, a little bit of runny nose, a little bit of shortness of breath, okay, or localized signs, one Mark 1 kit works just fine. Slam one into them, okay? Or if you're drawing it up yourself, drop 2 milligrams of atropine, 1 gram of 2-PAM, okay? If you have a moderate exposure, probably going to want to go with 2 Mark 1 kits right off the bat, okay? Or 2 to 4 milligrams of atropine and the same 1 gram of 2-PAM, okay? And if it's a severe exposure, 3 Mark 1 kits, okay? And these are the folks that you're going to need to manage their airway. You're going to need suction to get the secretions cleared. Ventilation, positive pressure ventilation. I'd give them the Valium right off the bat, whether they're seizing or not, okay? And then be prepared to repeat the atropine every 5 to 10 minutes as necessary, okay? And the as necessary means until they are dry, okay? And then you can repeat the 2-PAM in an hour, okay? So, does that answer your question? For kids, obviously, we changed the dosage based on age. Nobody's going to remember this. So however you remember pediatric dosages, if it's on your smartphone or whatever, okay, pull it up, tailor the treatment to the patient's age, okay? Same thing with the 2-PAM. Same thing with the Valium, okay? So, summary, vapor exposure. Symptoms develop very quickly, okay? If you're ambulatory after a vapor exposure, you're probably going to be okay, okay? The risk of secondary contamination is smaller. Get the clothing off, that probably takes care of most of it, okay? And if they are sicker, antidote as soon as you get it. Liquid exposure, symptoms can be delayed for hours, so these people need to be transported. They all should be deconned prior to transport, okay, to minimize that risk of secondary contamination, and they need antidotes as well. So, auto-injectors. Auto-injectors are nice, okay? Pre-measured, rapid administration. Okay. You don't have to screw with anything, okay? Mark 1 kit. Okay. Remember, as long as it's in this plastic thing, these things are disarmed, okay? The minute you take it out of the plastic, it's armed and dangerous, okay? The colored end of the cap is the business end. So you want to resist the urge to do this, okay? Because these are spring-loaded needles, and if you deploy it with your finger over the needle, that spring-loaded needle, it's strong enough that it will drive that needle right through the bone of your finger, okay? And then you're going to be looking for a pair of pliers to extricate yourself, okay? So be careful with these, okay? Once you take them out, they're ready to go. We always recommend that if you're going to use it like a pen, okay? Deploy it like a pen. You push it against the thigh until it deploys, okay? And then hold it in place for a count of 10 to be sure all of the medication is injected, Now, this is the Valium auto injector. These are expired, so we're going to use it. Okay. If I push it, you can see the Valium, how quickly. I know. It's my artwork. I got special permission to do this. Okay, so the Valium, 2 milligrams, small volume, it's injected pretty quickly, okay? Not a big deal, okay? Pralidoxine. Okay. So you got to keep it in place to get all that delivered, okay? Needle, not that long, but through the thumb. They sell trainers. The trainers just have a little plastic knobby on here if you haven't seen them rather than the needle, so you get an idea for how much force you need to apply. I have a set of the trainers, and depending on the audience I teach, I bring the trainer. I taught this class, left the trainer home one day, okay? So I talked to one of my medics and said, we have more trainers, get me another trainer. So he handed me Mark I kit, okay? Trainer, okay, good. Pulled it out, demonstrating it to the audience, okay? Deployed it with my thumb, and the needle promptly came out, squirted Valium, squirted the atropine up in the air. Wasn't a trainer, it was the real thing. I didn't see him for the rest of the day. So once you inject it, hold it in place for 10 seconds or so, count to 10 anyway. Take it out, massage the area, okay? And then appropriately dispose of this in a sharps container. Note how many of these Mark I kits or how much atropine you use in a patient. Put a piece of tape on their forehead, okay? If you're using Mark I kits, just hash marks. If you're using atropine, note the dose, because obviously we're gonna wanna know how much the patient got. This is a graph that shows you the different ways of administering atropine and how quickly it gets into the bloodstream, okay? You see time 0 at the bottom, okay? That's when we're doing our injection. The left-hand graph, that sort of dot dash graph, okay? That is if you were to inject atropine intravenously. That's how fast, from the time you inject it till you can measure the blood rate and the effect on the heart rate, that's how fast it acts. The solid line, the extreme right line, that's the effect of atropine if you were to use a standard IM injection. So you drew up the atropine yourself and you gave the patient an IM injection, okay? And you can see that it takes a good 10 minutes before you start seeing any effect at all, and really a good 20 to 30 minutes before we get a good effect. The middle line, the dotted line, that one is the response to atropine if you give it via auto-injector, okay? So you can see it's between the two. We get a decent response within about 5 minutes, okay? So within 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the response you're seeing in the patient, that's your timing for repeating the dose if you have to, okay? Now, where do you get some of this stuff? Well, you know, the feds said, we're going to create a stockpile of antidotes and antibiotics for you that will disperse to you. Well, that's really nice. But if I have a chemical event, getting it from the feds is not fast enough. Okay, it's going to take hours. So they created the ChemPack project. The ChemPack program is to take chemical antidotes, 2-PAM, Valium, and atropine, and pre-deploy it locally. Okay, so in Colorado, we have a supply of antidote available. CDPHE is the lead agency for that. They're responsible for the program. They are responsible for receiving and deploying this stuff. Okay, they get support by local agencies, Denver Public Health, a variety of other hospitals, public health departments, etc. Okay, all of these things remain the property of the feds. So we can use them if we need to, but it's their property, okay? So CDC still owns it, okay? In order to get this stuff, You have to have a climate-controlled space. It has to have electricity and backup power. It is secure. Okay. It has an intrusion alarm. It has a direct line to the CDC and the U.S. Marshals. If you access a chem pack, it automatically dials the CDC. It automatically dials the U.S. Marshals, and they will come and say hello to you and find out what's going on. Okay. Has to be easily accessible, and it is available for mutual aid requests. Okay. Each storage site has designated personnel who can deploy it. Denver Health has a cache of this stuff. The EMS department can deploy it. The emergency medicine attending can deploy it. Okay. You can use it at any time if it's a terrorist incident. If it's an accidental exposure, they want you to use up your supply of drugs first and then go into the chem pack. So use up your atropine first. Okay. And use is pre-authorized. I don't have to call anybody to get into this. If there's a special event, Democratic National Convention, like we had, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, okay, the state can move chem packs to where that event is, just in case something happens. There's 2 types of containers: hospital container, EMS container. Hospital container is mostly bulk antidote, so we get to draw it up. The EMS container, mostly auto injectors. You guys get to poke people with those, okay? The formulary assumes that 30% of your victims will be mild, 40% will be moderate, 30% will be severe. So the end result is the hospital container can treat